The Zyphar Dominion had encountered countless civilizations, analyzed thousands of warships, and crushed resistance without a second thought. Their empire spanned light years, and their technology was among the most advanced in the galaxy. Yet, as they drifted through unclaimed space, they found something unexpected. A lone vessel, human in origin, floating just outside known territories. It was neither concealed nor aggressive, simply waiting. Initial scans showed nothing extraordinary. A sleek design, enhanced armor, moderate weaponry. The Zyphar captain, Zelvoth, watched the readings with mild amusement. Humanity was a recent addition to interstellar travel, an ambitious but inferior species still clawing its way into galactic relevance. Their technology was laughable compared to Zyphar warships, or so they thought. "Begin deep scan," Zelvoth ordered. The crew complied, sending an advanced probe to infiltrate the human vessel systems. The moment the scan initiated, something changed. The Zyphar ship's displays flickered, distorting for a fraction of a second. The readings shifted. At first, it was subtle, minor inconsistencies in the ship's composition. The hull wasn't standard material. The energy output was fluctuating yet controlled. Then the scan went deeper, breaching encrypted files, accessing restricted systems. And that's when the anomalies became impossible to ignore. The Zyphar had expected outdated human technology. Instead, they found something else. Battle logs. The records unfolded before them. Not mere skirmishes, not regional conflicts, but wars. Brutal, merciless engagements spanning centuries. The devastation was incomprehensible. Entire continents burned, billions dead, cities reduced to radioactive wastelands, and still humanity fought on. It wasn't just war, it was an obsession. No empire had ever waged destruction like this. Zelvoth's hands tightened into fists. What is this? More data flooded in. Tactical adaptations, last stands, desperate offensives. In every scenario, humanity refused to surrender. When overpowered, they resorted to asymmetrical warfare, guerrilla tactics, psychological operations. In every instance, they learned, adapted, and countered. The Zyphar's war doctrine was built on calculated efficiency, overwhelming force that ensured swift victories. Humanity's doctrine was different. It was relentless. A new log appeared. A single ship against an enemy fleet. Suicide by all logic. The human vessel should have fled. Didn't. It tore through superior forces, adapting mid-battle, sacrificing parts of itself just to cripple the enemy. And in the end, it won. Not through numbers, not through firepower, but through sheer, unrelenting will. Zelvoth's second-in-command, Krelzon, spoke with visible hesitation. "Sir, the ship is scanning us back." His blood ran cold. That shouldn't have been possible. Zyphar technology was superior, their encryption unbreakable. Yet, the human vessel was looking back. The ship's database fought against the Zyphar systems, pushing back, infiltrating. Suddenly, their own screens were flooded with images, raw and censored footage. The Battle of Stalingrad. The trenches of World War I. Hiroshima. The D-Day landings. The Tet Offensive. Urban warfare, nuclear devastation, bodies piled high, and still they fought. A low alarm echoed through the Zyphar ship. Krelzon's voice shook. "We should disengage." Zelvoth remained silent, watching. The deeper they scanned, the worse it became. The logs shifted, showing humanity's expansion into space. First contact scenarios. Not diplomatic envoys, but hostile engagements. Wars against species far stronger than them. And humanity had won. A final entry surfaced. A direct message, buried within the ship systems, now displayed on their monitors. "You wanted to see. Now you know." And then the Zyphar systems crashed. Every console went dark. Weapons, engines, shields offline. Their ship had been compromised. Infiltrated by an enemy they didn't even know was there. The human vessel, still unmoving, had disabled them without firing a single shot. Panic spread through the Zyphar crew. Zelvoth felt something he had never experienced in all his years of conquest. Something alien. Something primal. Fear. The bridge was silent. No one dared to speak. Zyphar warships did not experience failure. Yet their systems remained dead, locked by a ship they had dismissed as insignificant. The human vessel still had not moved. It simply waited. Zelvatha's mind raced. This was not possible. Humanity was a young species, barely stepping beyond their home system. Yet the data his crew had uncovered told a different story. The brutality, the strategic cunning, the sheer audacity of their warfare, it defied logic. And now, this single warship had turned the tables without a single shot. He clenched his jaw. Status report. Krelzon's voice was strained. Weapons offline. Communications jammed. Our navigational systems are locked in a recursive loop. Whatever the human vessel did, it's inside our systems. Inside. The idea was revolting. The Zyphar had always been the superior force, the invaders, the ones who infiltrated and dismantled. To have the roles reversed was unthinkable. A flicker on the main screen. Then, without warning, the human ship sent something new. More data, more history, more horror. They saw soldiers walking through a battlefield of ash and glass, the aftermath of a nuclear firestorm that had erased entire cities. They saw men and women fighting in trenches filled with corpses, their faces hollow, their eyes dead, but their hands still gripping weapons. They saw warships burning in orbit, crews sacrificing themselves to ensure victory. The Zyphar had seen war, but not like this. This isn't war. One of the bridge officers whispered. This is madness. It defied the Zyphar understanding of combat. They fought for expansion, for conquest, for the controlled application of force. But humanity endured. They suffered, and they did not break. Even when faced with extinction, they refused to surrender. The Zyphar prided themselves on efficiency. Humanity did not care for efficiency. They fought in ways that made no sense, turning battlefields into wastelands, sacrificing thousands just to gain a few meters of ground. They deployed strategies that no logical mind would consider viable, and yet, they won. Zelvath forced himself to focus. Can we purge the system? Krelzon hesitated. We've tried. Whatever the human AI injected, it's rewriting itself faster than we can contain it. It was evolving, just like humanity. More footage. This time it was modern. Real-time battle simulations, classified reports, intercepted transmissions. Humanity had hidden their strength. The Zyphar had assumed them to be weak because their expansion was slow. But that was not hesitation, it was preparation. And now the Zyphar had seen too much. Another message flashed on their screens. Your mistake was thinking we were prey. Zelvath felt a cold sweat form along his ridges. The human warship had been silent this whole time, but it had been listening, watching. Enough, he snapped. We disengage. Now. Krelzon nodded. The crew scrambled, manually overriding systems, trying to run. The Zyphar Dominion was powerful, their fleets unmatched, their technology advanced beyond comprehension. And yet, at this moment, they were reduced to a single thought. Escape. But then, the ship sensors blared a new alarm. A human fleet was approaching. They were out of time. The Zyphar ship was trapped. The human vessel had disabled their systems, infiltrated their databanks, and now an entire fleet was closing in. Zelvath had commanded countless battles, conquered entire worlds. But this was different. They had never encountered an enemy like this, an enemy that did not intimidate with words, but with sheer, silent proof of what they were capable of. Multiple human warships on approach, Krelzon reported, his voice barely controlled. No transmissions, no demands. They're just coming. That was the worst part. The humans weren't gloating, weren't taunting, weren't broadcasting threats. They simply acted. It was the same in every piece of history they had just witnessed. Humanity didn't need to declare their intent. Their intent was already clear. Zelvath forced himself to think rationally. How long until they reach us? Minutes. Not enough time. Their engines were dead. Their weapons useless. And the human fleet was not slowing down. They were coming to finish this. Then something changed. The human warship, the one that had disabled them, finally moved. not toward them but toward the fleet, and it signaled. It was the first direct communication since the incident had begun. The Zyphar's display, still partially locked down, managed to process the simple transmission. They are no longer a threat. The fleet stopped. The human warships, which had been on an unyielding course, suddenly halted just outside of firing range. The Zyphar crew remained frozen, barely daring to believe it. The warships hovered there, their weapons primed, their presence overwhelming, but they did not attack. They're waiting, Krelzon realized. Waiting for what? A response? A retreat? Or something else entirely? Zelvoth knew they were being tested. The Zyphar Dominion had always seen itself as an apex force, but now they were being given a choice. To push forward into a war they were now beginning to understand they could not win, or to walk away. The worst part was that the humans had already won. Not through force, not through destruction, but through a simple, undeniable display of truth. They were monsters of war, and they were letting the Zyphar live. The shame was unbearable. "Prepare for retreat," Zelvoth finally ordered. His voice was hollow, his pride shattered. "The Dominion must know what we have learned." Krelzon nodded and began manually restoring what little control they had over their systems. It would take time, but the humans allowed them that time. That was the final insult. The Zyphar had believed themselves the masters of war, and in one silent encounter, humanity had proven otherwise. The Dominion would have to rethink everything. Because war was not a strategy to humans. It was their nature. The Zyphar warship limped away from the battlefield, its systems slowly coming back under their control. But there was no victory here, no triumph to be salvaged. The moment their scans had breached the human ship systems, the outcome had been sealed. The Zyphar had learned what they were never meant to see. The silence on the bridge was suffocating. No one spoke as the crew worked, manually resetting subsystems, carefully navigating out of the engagement zone. Zelvoth sat rigid in his command chair, his mind drowning in the revelations forced upon them. The sheer scale of human warfare had been overwhelming. It had been terrifying. Krelzon finally broke the silence. "Do we report this?" A foolish question. Of course they had to. The Zyphar Dominion believed itself unmatched in warfare, but that belief was built on ignorance. The humans had not announced their capabilities, had not sought recognition or fear. They had simply waited until someone was foolish enough to look too closely. Zelvoth exhaled slowly. Yes, the High Command must know. Even as he said it, he wondered if they would believe him. Could a species like humanity truly exist? Could an empire built on conquest accept that there was an enemy even more suited for destruction than they were? "They let us go," Krelzon muttered almost to himself. "Why?" Zelvoth had asked himself the same question 100 times in the last few minutes. The human fleet had been there. They had outmaneuvered, outthought, and outgunned them in every conceivable way. And yet they had not destroyed the Zyphar ship. Why? Perhaps that was the most terrifying answer of all. Because they didn't need to. The message was clear. Humanity didn't wage war recklessly, didn't seek conquest for its own sake. They fought when necessary, and when they did not stop until their enemy was broken beyond recognition. They had given the Zyphar a warning. Krelzon's voice was barely a whisper. "We are not ready for them." No, they were not. The Zyphar had believed themselves to be the ultimate force of war in the galaxy. Now they knew the truth. Humanity was not simply another empire. They were something else. Something far, far worse. The Dominion could never afford to fight them. And if they did, it would be the last war the Zyphar ever fought. The Zyphar Dominion had always operated under a singular belief. War was a science, and they had perfected it. Every conquest, every battle, every engagement had followed precise calculations. Enemies were analyzed, their weaknesses exploited, and their defeat ensured before the first shot was even fired. That belief was now shattered. Zelvoth sat motionless as their damaged warship drifted through the void, finally clear of human space. Every system had been checked and rechecked, ensuring that whatever the human vessel had done to them was gone. But the real damage wasn't to their ship. It was to their understanding of warfare itself. There was no debating what had happened. The humans had let them go. Not out of mercy, not out of diplomacy, but out of something far worse, indifference. Krelzon studied the tactical logs, as if searching for something, anything that would make this encounter make sense. We always assumed they were expanding slowly because they were weak, he said finally. But that's not it. Zelvoth didn't respond. He already knew. Humanity wasn't weak. They weren't hesitant. They were simply waiting. Waiting for a reason to fight. The Zyphar had given them that reason, however briefly, and in return, humanity had shown them exactly what that meant. The battle footage they had extracted played on an auxiliary screen, and for the first time in his life, Zelvoth couldn't bring himself to watch it. The brutality was not just in the destruction. It was in the mindset. A species that could endure anything. A species that would fight until the last breath, not for conquest, not for survival, but because they refused to lose. And the most horrifying part? They enjoyed it. Krelzon exhaled sharply. If High Command orders us to return, if they decide humanity is a threat, Zelvoth cut him off. We will not return. Krelzon hesitated, staring at him. But we will not return, Zelvoth repeated, voice firm. If they refuse to listen, if they see this as a challenge instead of a warning, then they are fools. Krelzon looked away. He didn't argue. He knew the truth just as well. The Dominion had encountered a force they were not prepared to face. The war they had spent centuries perfecting meant nothing against an enemy that had already lived through worse. Zelvoth straightened. Prepare the report. Every detail. Krelzon hesitated before nodding. He didn't ask if High Command would believe them. That didn't matter anymore, because whether they believed or not, the truth remained. Humanity was not to be provoked, and if war ever came, the Zyphar would not survive it.